soaked by an incessant rain. Susan was delivering lunch in a corporate skyscraper, her heavy delivery bag slung over her shoulder, her blonde hair stuck to her face. Exhausted, she spoke on the phone, her voice breaking with frustration. "I walked 3 kilometers in the rain for your lunch, and now you don't want it anymore." As soon as she stepped through the revolving door, she collided head-on with someone. The impact knocked her off balance, and 2 lunchboxes slipped from her arms. One landed with a dull thud, slightly dented, while the others scattered across the marble floor of the lobby. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, crouching down to pick up the debris, her fingers trembling. "I didn't see, I wasn't looking." A calm, warm voice replied, "It's all right." Susan looked up. A tall man, his dark shirt soaked by the rain, stood there, showing no irritation, just a gentle curiosity in his gaze. "I'll pay for both boxes," he said, kneeling beside her without hesitation. "But if you don't mind, we could share the one that's intact." Taken aback, Susan nodded timidly. A few minutes later, they were sitting on the stone steps at the back of the building, sheltered from the rain. Liam, as he introduced himself, handed her half of the meal. They ate in silence, the patter of the rain creating a soothing rhythm. "Usually, people yell when things go wrong," Susan murmured, breaking the silence. "You don't." Liam shrugged. Getting angry doesn't make anyone less hungry. This made her laugh, a tired but genuine laugh, rare for her. Without a word, he took a napkin from his pocket and gently wrapped it around her trembling hand to wipe away the moisture. "These hands," he said softly, "they're meant to hold a pencil or a brush, not insulated bags." Susan held her breath. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even when she was an architecture student, before her life crumbled under the weight of bills and responsibilities. Her eyes misted over, but she said nothing. Their gazes met, and for a moment, the world faded away. No more deadlines, no more canceled orders, just a man who saw beyond her wounds, and a woman who dared to believe she was still worth something. The rain continued to fall, creating a serene and calming atmosphere around them. Susan returned home, sighing as she unlocked the door to her small third-floor apartment in a worn building. The hallway lights flickered, as if exhausted. Inside, the space was modest but tidy. Secondhand furniture, a humming electric radiator, and stacks of textbooks near the couch. "I'm home," she called softly. From the couch, a cheerful voice replied, "Hey, Suz, did you win millions today?" Her little brother, Alex, 13, was lying under a worn blanket, a thermometer and a bottle of syrup beside him. Despite his fragile health, his spirit remained bright. "No millions," she replied with a smile, moving closer to brush his hair from his forehead. "But I have rice and grilled chicken. Will you eat a bit later?" "Only if there's sauce," he mumbled with a grin. Susan checked his fever, down, thankfully, before settling near the window. Outside, the city glimmered with cold indifference, flickering neon lights, distant sirens, raindrops sliding down the glass. As she rummaged through her bag for a wet towel, she found a folded paper she hadn't noticed. The handwriting was neat, confident, yet gentle. "You deserve better. Elle." Susan stared at the message, as if it would transform. Then, without realizing it, she smiled, her eyes moist. That evening, Susan slipped the note between the pages of an old architecture textbook, its spine cracked but still intact. Liam Hayes, in his corner office at the top of a skyscraper, gazed at the city through a rain-streaked window. Below, people scurried like ants, living without ever questioning why. Once, he had been like them, until he built an architectural empire, Hayes and Brooke. That day, the rain had soaked him, but he didn't care. It wasn't the humidity that occupied him, but that girl, Susan, with her blonde hair stuck to her cheeks, apologizing for a spilled lunch as if it were the end of the world. He hadn't planned to linger in the lobby. He was there to inspect a construction site, one of the few tasks he still enjoyed. But something had held him back. Perhaps the rain, perhaps her. Susan seemed to carry too many fragile fragments, with hands that should have created, not just survived. Back in his office, the silence was thick. No assistant, no calls, just him and his thoughts. He opened his computer and typed, Susan Carter. He hesitated before hitting enter. It felt intrusive, but her eyes, filled with a familiar pain, haunted him. In a world of facades, she had shown something raw, something real. The results appeared: major in architecture, scholarship, dropout in her second year, but before that, brilliant grades, a regional design award, a photo in University Magazine. Susan, hair tied back, proudly posed next to a model of a community center for underprivileged neighborhoods. He reopened the magazine photo. Susan believed in something. Then he saw her again, kneeling in the lobby, trembling hands, apologizing for a ruined lunch, as if the world were cruel because of her. Susan stared at her screen, incredulous. An email without a header, just a terse message. You have been selected for a short-term internship with our design team. Start Monday. Location: Hayes and Brook, Level 5. She had never applied there. After repeated automatic rejections, she had stopped trying. Why her? Why now? An inner voice whispered, try. So she did. On Monday morning, she stood before the glass doors of Hayes and Brook, palms sweaty, her reflection in the glass making her feel tiny. But she entered, for even small, she deserved this chance. The team welcomed her with polite smiles, handshakes, but a professional distance. Names flew around, Mara, Theo, but they blurred in her mind, like those of people who wouldn't bother to remember you. Susan took it in stride. She arrived early, left late, took notes, asked questions when permitted, and found solutions on her own otherwise. By the end of the week, her concepts were displayed alongside the others, without praise or criticism, just acknowledged. That was enough. But whispers circulated in the hallways. She caught a phrase, it must be nice to have someone up top pulling the strings. Her face flushed, but she lowered her head, pretending not to have heard. That afternoon, on the 4th floor landing, she paused, a file too heavy in her hands. Below, the atrium buzzed with designers and assistants, a machine whose working she did not yet master. Above, she saw him again, the man she often crossed paths with, always in the same spot, leaning on the railing, observing the team. Dark jeans, rolled up shirt. He was neither ostentatious nor polite, but exuded a natural authority. Their eyes met briefly. Susan looked away. That evening, she stayed late, perfecting a 3D model for sustainable housing. The office emptied, the lights dimmed. Alone, she sought refuge in the restroom, locked herself in a stall, and cried silently, quickly, for she had no time to be fragile. The whispers haunted her. She, the outsider, the one who didn't belong. Her phone vibrated. A message from Alex. Made dinner. You okay? She wiped her face, replied, on my way. As she exited, he was there, the man from the railing, holding a bottle of water. Water, he said simply. Something strange was happening. On Monday morning, Susan logged into the system and found a rendering file she had spent the weekend building, already there, labeled, half formatted for review. She blinked. She hadn't uploaded this version. Her last draft was on a USB stick at home. Yet, the file bore her signature, her color shortcuts, her style. She brushed the thought aside, attributing it to fatigue-induced forgetfulness. But it happened again. Midweek, her laptop, slow during a presentation test, was replaced the next day by an upgraded model, accompanied by a sticky note. Keep going. No one knew who had ordered it. Mara shrugged. Theo assumed she had requested it herself. The third time was the strangest. One Thursday morning, late due to a train delay, a spilled coffee, and a panicked message from Alex, Susan realized she had forgotten her main project for a community park. Her heart stopped. The review was in an hour. But on her desk, the folder was there, printed, bound, her name handwritten in blue on the cover. It wasn't her handwriting, nor Mara's or Theo's. Susan slowly opened a drawer, took out her wallet, and unfolded the note found weeks earlier. You deserve better. Ed. She compared the two. Same pen pressure, same slant on the E, same nonchalance in the S of her name. Her breath caught. It was him. The man from the rain, from the hallway, the one who had told her not to forget. She whispered, "Is it you?" Her heart raced, not from fear, but from an awareness so improbable that she almost laughed. Why was this man, whoever he was, doing all this? The notes, the computer, the files. How did he know what she needed before she even asked? On the back balcony, she lined up the two papers, trembling hands, as if the truth would change. The wind lifted her hair as she gazed at the city. Somewhere in this steel labyrinth, someone had chosen to help her without seeking recognition. She pressed the notes against her chest, eyes moist but determined. If it was him, then this internship, his presence, his words meant more than she had believed. He hadn't just opened a door, he had stood behind it, ensuring she wouldn't stumble. Susan needed to know why. Susan stood before the glass door on the top floor, the hallway muted and intimidating. The two papers, the note and the project label, clenched in her hand, her heart raced. She knocked once. "Come in," a voice replied. She pushed the door open. Liam, behind a sleek black desk, looked up. The skyline stretched behind him through immense windows. With rolled-up sleeves and an open collar, he appeared simple, but his expression changed upon seeing her. No surprise, just a heavy stillness. Susan stepped forward, placing the two papers on the desk without a word. He glanced at them, then fixed his gaze on her. "Yes," he said softly, "they came from me." A heavy silence settled in. Susan's voice broke. "Why?" Liam slowly stood, walking around the desk, stopping at a respectful distance. "Because I saw you," he said, "that day in the lobby. Not just a delivery person who spilled a meal. Someone who was fighting, surviving when she should be creating." Tears welled in Susan's eyes before she could hold them back. "You should have told me." "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you'd think it was pity or a game." Her voice rose. "But it feels like a game. You up there, watching, leaving notes like riddles, arranging everything without telling me. That's not how life works." "I know," he replied, stepping back slightly. "And I'm sorry." She turned away, wiping a tear. "You know what it's like to work so hard to be taken seriously, only to learn someone is pulling the strings." "I wasn't pulling the strings," he said gently. "I was removing obstacles." Susan no longer spoke. Her silence was a wall, her throat too tight to respond. Her legs moved instinctively, carrying her out of the office. She left Liam alone in the silence. She did not write a resignation email. She simply stopped coming. No exit interview, no awkward goodbyes. One night, she retrieved her belongings from an empty office, placed her badge on the table, and left without looking back. The following week passed like a fog. Deliveries, errands, visits to Alex, attempts to convince herself that she had made the right choice, that leaving was dignity, not capitulation. But the silence weighed more than she had anticipated. No messages from Liam, no apologies, just emptiness. Until the seventh day. That morning, a package arrived at her apartment. without a label or return address, just her name written in a familiar hand. Susan stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside were rolled plans, meticulously drawn. It was her project, the one she had talked about in the rain. A small cabin by a lake with large windows, a reading nook, an herb garden, a bedroom with sky blue walls for Alex. She had sketched it once in a lost notebook, but here it was perfected, real. A note was taped to the last page. You are not the girl who delivers meals. You are the one who made me believe again. Ed. Susan brought her hand to her mouth, a tear sliding down her cheek. No sobs, no dramatic collapse, just her standing in her small apartment, holding a dream that someone had resurrected. The paper felt heavy, for it carried more than ink. Hope, the hope that someone had seen her, not as an assistant or a charity case, but as a woman with something still to offer. She sat on the couch, clutching the note to her chest, the plans beside her. Tears flowed gently, but her heart was calm, open. This was not just a drawing. It was being recognized, believed. She knew this story was not over. A new determination ignited within her. Susan could not ignore this gesture, this proof that she mattered. She had to return to Hayes and Brooke, not to submit, but to understand, to claim her place. Susan stood once again in front of the Hayes and Brooke building, her hands trembling, her heart racing. This time, she walked through the doors without hesitation. The receptionist looked up, surprised, but said nothing. Susan took the elevator to the top floor, the button shining under her finger like a promise. A board meeting was taking place. She knew it and knew she had no business being there, but it no longer mattered. The doors opened. Liam, at the end of a long glass table, was speaking to executives and shareholders, graphs projected on the screen. He paused when he saw her. Time froze. Susan moved forward, her steps calm yet resolute. Liam's expression changed, not shock, but a deep warmth like a return home. He turned to the room. I have something to say before we continue. Silence fell. I founded this company to create more than buildings, to give it meaning. But I lost that. Then someone came into my life and reminded me what it was to believe, to hope. He looked at Susan. Her name is Susan Carter, and whether you know it or not, she is the reason I remember why this place matters. A stunned silence followed, then applause erupted, like the sun breaking through the rain. Susan, frozen in the doorway, her eyes shining, slowly stepped forward. Liam met her halfway. He pulled a small box from his jacket and opened it. A silver key sparkled. This is not a gift, he said, his voice steady. It's a responsibility. He placed the box in her hands. I don't know what to say, she murmured. Liam smiled. Start with yes. She laughed softly, a tear rolling down her cheek. She looked at the smiling faces, the city behind the glass, the man who had shared a meal in the rain. The moment in the meeting room marked a turning point. Susan did not become the creative director overnight, but the key in her hand symbolized more than just an office. It represented recognition, a chance to become who she once was. The following days were a mix of apprehension and excitement. She returned to work, no longer as an invisible intern, but as someone the team viewed differently. The whispers ceased, replaced by respectful nods. Mara sought her advice on a presentation. Theo shared a coffee. Susan settled into her new office, the morning light flooding the space, just as Liam had promised. She hung Alex's drawing, Suz's future office, near her screen. Every morning, she looked at it, a reminder of why she was there. Liam, for his part, also changed. He was more present, less withdrawn in his office. He consulted Susan on a community center project, the one she had designed at university. It's your idea, he said. Make it what you wanted it to be. She dove into the work, her nights filled with sketches, her days with meetings where her voice, hesitant at first, gained confidence. But the past still weighed heavily. Susan sometimes doubted, did she really deserve this? One night, alone in her office, she reread the note. You are not the girl who delivers meals. Tears welled up, but she wiped them away. She was no longer that girl, but she would never forget where she came from. Months later, Susan stood on a vacant lot where her community center was taking shape. Cranes towered, workers hustled, and the smell of fresh concrete filled the air. She wore a hard hat, plans tucked under her arm, discussing with the team. Alex, by her side, took photos amazed. Did you do this, Sus? He asked. She smiled. We did it together. Liam appeared, dressed in a simple shirt, as always. He surveyed the site, then her. It started to look like something, he said. Susan nodded, what it was meant to be. Their exchange was simple, but loaded with everything they had been through. A collision in the rain, a word slipped into a bag, a key unlocking more than an office. Susan was no longer the drenched delivery girl, nor the invisible intern. She was Susan Carter, architect, creator, survivor. Liam had found his purpose again, building spaces that changed lives, not just numbers. Their story wasn't a fairy tale, but a rarer truth. Two broken people who had seen each other, truly seen, and chose to rise together. The community center, with its glass walls and gardens, became a symbol of this rebirth. At the inauguration, Susan spoke before a crowd, her voice clear. This place is for those who still believe, even when the world tells them to stop. Liam, in the front row, applauded, his eyes shining.